So, hello. Today we're talking with Sean. And hi, Sean. Thank you for coming to the podcast today. I was
My
waiting.
pleasure.
I was waiting to speak to you for a while now because you know the NFTs, which we're primarily speaking today about, I think are like a big topic in Web3 space in the metaverse, and I also feel it's like a big thing which not even like you don't have to be a Web3 native platform to do something with NFTs. And understanding it is really important. And the most common misunderstanding of what NFTs are is that like it's a scam picture or it's like another version of like something to trade on and flip, which admittedly some people do and earn a lot of money, so good for them. Uh, but before we get there, like why don't you introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about what you do and what the company you work for, SENS, does as well.
Cool, no problem. Yeah, so my name's Sean Delaney, and I'm the head of business development and marketing for SENS. And yeah, we're a Web3 development company. We do software development outsourcing for companies all around the world. So we're based in Vietnam. This is where our operations and our development is. But our clients are, Singapore, Hong Kong, Australia, the States, and we've got a few in Europe as well. So we specialize in the Web3 space, and that's probably kind of 60–70% of our business at the minute. So, we help build out remote teams and we help Web3 projects get off the ground really from kind of help with the design phase all the way through to sort of product launch. So yeah, in a nutshell, that's what we do.
Oh, that's great, actually. So could you also talk a little bit about what's your general interest in Web3? Why did you go into this space? What you attracted you to NFTs? And why did you decide to talk more about NFTs and like, in social media and the content you actually create?
Yeah, sure. So it was kind of accidental, I guess. So I've kind of always worked within tech in some shape or form. I spent most of my career in cloud computing and software development, like Web2 software development. My knowledge of kind of Web3 was kind of limited to sort of dabbling with cryptocurrencies in 2018, 2019, like a lot of people. And my very basic knowledge of NFTs was kind of flipping, trading, digital art, pictures of apes, things like that. It was only really about a year ago when I started working at SENS that I really started to understand the technology, the technology behind Web3, blockchain technology, NFTs, what they really are, real use cases outside of crypto and digital art. And what I realized was what most of the world thinks, which was previously me, when they hear blockchain, they think cryptocurrency. When they hear NFTs, they think pictures of apes. And that's both of those are just such a tiny application of that technology. I was blown away by the tech and the possibilities and, fell in love with it. And I'm really passionate about some of the projects that we've got to work on across a range of industries that aren't really talked about. And that, these are the key to mass adoption, but it's not the stuff that makes the headlines. So initially I started talking about NFTs and NFT use cases in other sectors, really just because it was kind of my own research and, it was how I was learning. The more I was realizing we were quite far from mass adoption and there was a damaged perception as a whole in Web3. A big part of that is kind of education. So it was kind of a twofold thing. It was for my own interest. It was something I enjoyed talking about. But also with the kind of drive to, if we're going to get closer to mass adoption, people have to become aware of what the technology enables outside of flipping and trading digital art or, cryptocurrency on the blockchain side of things.
Well, Yeah, I think again that's the big problem because I've been like away from social media for a while. I've been away from the internet for a while. I've been in the army at that point when NFTs came into the in its like role as they are, and I kind of missed when they started and why they like became prominent. And
Mm.
then it was just like apes, pictures, and then there was like I think there started like I started getting like some clients come to me wanting to tokenize their property, their like physical
Yeah.
uh, real estate property. And
Mm.
there's also, I think there's a big legal argument to have about it because like I'm not sure you're allowed to do that. You're not actually tokenizing a property. Well, you can't physically do that at the moment, as far as I understand. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe you'll correct me. But the way I see it is like you're just buying like memberships. And then I thought like, okay, so NFTs, okay, you can buy like memberships or like passes, like just something like that. Which, okay, so I thought this was a use case, but without actually having worked in depth with NFTs, it's really hard for me to think of some interesting use cases for it. And I think that's what's important because like, well, every business can just like tokenize its business. Like, I mean, like just sell parts of it as NFT. It's
Mm.
like wrong. So.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's exactly it, right? So this is a common scenario when there's an advancement in technology. Um, it's going to unlock various possibilities across a range of industries. Some will be more ready-made than others. Some will be industries that are far more complex than others. And what you rightly mentioned, you come up against regulation. So it's not always as simple as what is the best fit for this technology. You have to consider other things like regulation. So, for example, you hit the nail on the head with real estate, right? It's an absolute stonewall, really obvious use case for blockchain technology in a variety of different areas, right? Certainly where I'm from in the UK, you can speak to anyone on the street and they've probably experienced an absolute nightmare process of either buying or selling a house or both, right? They're long, arduous processes with multiple third parties, paper documents that's stored in a filing cabinet somewhere. These are all things that can be stored on a blockchain as an NFT, as a true, unique, traceable, accountable asset. You remove the need for third parties. You cut down time, efficiency, costs of something like the buying and selling of the housing process. But that is a heavily regulated sector with so much, so many legal issues, so many parties involved. It's a fantastic use case, but it's a very, very complex one. But we are seeing, because it is such a use case, we are seeing companies kind of taking the lead on that and trying to do things in that space, whether it's fractionalized investment or whether it's literally the process of buying and selling a house as an NFT, which has been done. I think the first one was 2019 or maybe in 2020. I think it was an apartment in Ukraine or something. But we're a long way off that, that being common practice and commonplace, but people are starting to develop and build. And, like anything, if there's enough financial and commercial incentive in an industry, you can then take this to regulators and get their buy-in. But it's a long process. You have other industries that are perhaps more ready-made, something like the ticketing industry, right, which is littered with problems, huge pain points in the current Web2 system, from ease of transfer of tickets, refunds, big problem, whether it's concerts, football matches, it's black market, ticket touts, blockchain NFTs are a ready-made use case for that. And that's more of an easy one. There are less third, fourth, fifth, sixth parties involved there. There's less regulation. So you're seeing more. The real blocker is somewhere like that is more around education and user experience for someone who's not a Web3 native, which is an easier, quicker fix than the regulatory minefield that is the real estate sector. So there's lots of things to consider when you're looking at different use cases. As I said, it's not always as simple as what's crying out for blockchain.
Well, I want to mention like a few things, but first about like regulation is, well, one of the problems I think is like, for example, I can't buy a house in UK. Well, I can physically buy a house if like I have the money. But I mean, for me, as not being like a UK citizen or a European citizen, I have more loopholes to actually go through than buying the house. So yeah, if I was like British, yeah, sure, I can just like buy an NFT and it will have like the copy of like the in the smart contract of the legislation, and like I feel it's a relatively more straightforward procedure. But right now, I can't buy the house, but I can buy the NFT because blockchain is like cross-border. Again, and you mentioned a country like Ukraine, but we do see that like most of the countries which are leading the charge with Web3 and blockchain are mostly those underdeveloped or like third world countries. Like, again, South America is like a lot of it is very popular. Then we have like Kenya and like parts of Africa which are heavily invested in it, which are also a bit less regulated than, again, like then you have like USA, European Union, United Kingdom, for example.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's. I think it depends country by country. So I think I mean, basically what you mentioned, something like, again, so again, what happens a lot with technological advancements is the technological advancement happens and then regulation comes later, right? Because it's got to be around for a while before a problem to arise, a situation to arise, and people go, hold on, we haven't got a rule in place for this. And that is by country by country. Where I am in Vietnam, for example, as a foreigner, you can't. I think it was about 2000. Correct me, I might get the date wrong, but it was only about 2015 before foreigners were allowed to buy property in Vietnam. And even now, they're allowed to buy an apartment, but they're not allowed to buy land, I think is the ruling. And even then, there's lots of barriers to that. It's not an easy place to purchase property, and that's that's Vietnam specifically. But you're right. Reality is, as Web3, one of the things is this borderless, ease of transfer, accessible nature of applications and financial protocols or whatever. But still, you have to adhere to the country that you're residing in or that you're doing business in. And there is a bit of a disconnect in a minute. And again, this will take time before that is resolved. And I think it will just be an ongoing thing as the technology evolves. But we're seeing in terms of technology, it's going to completely revolutionize how business is done internationally. And it's the regulation that's going to have to catch up with the technology rather than the other way around. Certainly with kind of access to DeFi protocols and whatnot. But the other thing is, you rightly said earlier that developing countries are often leading the way. And, this isn't just because of regulation, but it's also due to the value proposition of Web3 technology, right? So again, Vietnam, I'm here, right? It's the last 2 years, it's been the number one in the world for crypto adoption globally in the chain analysis reports. And why is that? And there's not one single reason, but it's a very young population. I think 2/3 of the country are under 30. It's a largely unbanked population. They don't have easy financial access, from people that are not wealthy and living in the city, which is a large portion of the country. And historically, there's been a very deep-set distrust in traditional finance, which is very common with developing countries because they often have, high inflation and historically unstable currencies. So the value proposition of what cryptocurrency is trying to do, when Bitcoin came around, was not a hard sell to the people of Vietnam or a similar country for South America, Africa as well. it was just, it was very easy to grasp that. Where, UK, where I'm from, maybe now with the last sort of 10 years of, catastrophic traditional finance scenarios, are people starting to really go, hold on a minute, something's not right here. But, they've never had the assets frozen overnight. They've never had the sort of inflation that's meant their wages are unlivable. It's made it uncomfortable, but it's not that real obvious use case that, people I've spoken to in countries where they've been politically or financially unstable. So I think that is often why you're seeing, Africa, Southeast Asia, South America, some parts of Eastern Europe as real kind of leaders in talent and developers, because they get it.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
No, definitely it is. It's interesting how it transforms. Again, like I want to go to another point, which is more business related, but you keep talking about, like, again, value proposition and why certain countries do this. I've read an economics book. It was by a Swiss economist. I don't remember his name, but he argued basically that the traditional view of economics, which is largely the Keynes model of economics, about like aggregate demand and aggregate supply, is, well, it's not the only view of like successful economics, but because the whole world is sold on it, everybody is trying to follow in it was like, the book is like 20 or 25 years old. Every country in the world is trying to follow the United States model, and again, part of the globalization. And nobody is actually creating unique value to their own countries, which I guess what you're describing right now is more that like countries are changing their financial models in other ways with, like, again, crypto and blockchain, which creates unique values for themselves. And probably each of those systems, if they're decentralized, will be unique to those. They won't be like alike as it is in Vietnam to like Argentina. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but another point which I just want to share, like an anecdote, and they kind of compare it to NFT. So back in 2013 or 2014, I was working in a company, and a client was a bank, a sort of bank, but it was a financial institution. They came to the company and they asked us, it was an IT company, and they're like, we want to implement a blockchain. And the project leader was like, what for? And they're like, well, it's like, it's all the rage nowadays. We need blockchain in our business. And ultimately, they decided not to do it because they didn't actually have a use case in particular for it, which I think might be something which is happening with NFT, where everybody's like, oh, NFT, we need NFT. We need to like do an airdrop or something, but like nobody really like fully understands what they can get out of NFTs.
Absolutely. No, you hit the nail on the head there. And I think that's common when you have any new buzzword or new technology, particularly if it's like, blockchain, which is driven by crypto rates and it's volatile. So you have these big highs and these big lows. And, that's attractive. That sells newspapers, that creates stories, that gets people's attention. And yeah, people jump on the bandwagon. But you're absolutely right, is Web3, Web2, irrelevant, right? Business is business. You have to have a value proposition. You have to be solving a pain point with your product, your service, whatever. Technology comes after that. Technology does or doesn't enable that solution or service or product that you're providing. You don't start with the technology. And that's the case for, business since business begun, right? But you're absolutely right. I see it all the time. Particularly in previous like bull markets, is people just jumping on the bandwagon and going, right, let's build a Web3 project and let's figure out a value prop later, which doesn't make any sense. And that's why you just see a lot of these hype, NFT projects that are jumping on that bandwagon. But the reality is there is some fantastic blockchain technology. NFTs is one in particular that can enable certain functionalities, features, things to happen that isn't previously possible. And that's different from industry to industry. I worked in cloud computing before, right, and saw the same thing. Cloud computing came around and it completely revolutionized, infrastructure as a service, allowed utility billing, instant scalability of, your e-commerce website or whatever. And it just changed how we could do things. But does that mean that cloud computing is for everything? No. But at the beginning, people thought it was. They put everything on the cloud, and they quickly realized that wasn't the case. It's just applicable to certain things. And then the reality is everybody utilizes cloud computing, right, in their day-to-day, but they don't know that they're doing that. It's infrastructure. Apart from the hosting company or the IT team, no one needs to know about that underlying infrastructure in the same way as no one needs to know you're using an NFT, you're using blockchain technology as the end user. And again, that's where there's a little bit of a gap. All the language, the talk, the projects lead with the tech, rather than just doing what business has always been in solving problems, making improvements to our lives and our habits.
But like whether it's called NFT or not, I guess it's like immaterial as long as the technology is there and like people get mass adopted to use. Like again, to go to one of the first examples, like buy a membership pass, which happens to be NFT, is one thing. But something I found in Web3 projects and companies who say they are entering Web3 space is that they create. I'm not sure if it's like on purpose, if they're lying to their consumers, or they just don't understand completely what they're doing. But they create a project which on the outside looks like, I don't know, a Web3 virtual environment or like an NFT marketplace. But in practice, it's just, okay, you just created another like virtual room, which is like completely centralized and has nothing to do with the metaverse in technological sense, or the NFT marketplace is just a normal online store, which just says it buys NFTs, which is not actually supported by any blockchain or smart contracts. And again, I'm not sure if they're lying, because the company I'm thinking about is, again, I don't remember because I'm not a big basketball fan, but the case was that like a basketball company was selling moments from their games. So like, okay, somebody like scores, and you can buy this, for example, a video as an NFT, and now it's yours. But there's no infrastructure supporting this. You're just buying moments, and then it becomes again like there's also a big documentary on NFTs, Line It Is Drawn. I don't know if you've seen it or not. Which it's a good. It's like 2 hours. Again, somebody on YouTube made it. Quite well, again, professional but well informed. And again, it talks about the fact that like when buying those pictures, you're not actually buying any like right to the picture per se, but you're just buying a space on the blockchain, which then can pretty much be, well, the picture itself can just as easily be changed by the original creator of the picture. So you may buy an ape, for example, and then like the original creator just changes what is on this space, right? So again, you're not actually buying, well, it's picture related, right? So, but you're buying the server space, well, the chain space, rather than the actual like picture-in-picture. Your whatever it's called. It's just like the packaging of the space.
And I think that's the reality. It's like certainly this year's been the year for utility NFTs, like real genuine use cases, and some of these are not financial. They're not for flipping and trading, and this is where true use case of NFTs will come from. And as I say, there will be a place for flipping and trading digital art, just like there is trading real art, right? It's got its place. It's got an audience. It's got people that that do that, that love doing that. But we are going to move away from it being all the noise and what everybody talks about within the space. And as I say, we're seeing more and more real use cases, within supply chain, within industry, within business to business, not something that you're going to buy and sell on OpenSea. The real genuine use case for something that is a digital, traceable, unique record stored on the blockchain. As I say, a lot of it will be industry, things like authenticating medicines on the blockchain as an NFT for the pharmaceutical industry, or authenticating luxury goods. That's a big issue. Fakes. There's a real strong use case there. Being able to trace materials in the supply chain of the fashion industry that is catastrophically terrible for the globe, right? For climate change and things like that, because there is so much wastage. But being able to track using NFTs every stage of the supply chain to improve efficiencies and hold companies accountable, like those are real use cases of NFTs. The stuff, and that's going to go behind the scenes. And, it's not sexy. It doesn't make people overnight billionaires, right? But that is, really cool stuff that the tech can enable.
Well, since you're touching now use cases, could you speak about some interesting ideas you had for NFTs for different industries, like travel and others, which you have talked about?
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, that's the thing. You can kind of pick an industry and talk about them. Travel is a good one. The most ready-made use case within the travel sector would just be more engaging memberships. And there's lots of people starting to test the water with those. Travel hospitality companies doing collaborations, but sort of a bit, further down the line, we'll get to the point where flight tickets, hotel bookings will be stored on the blockchain as NFTs, right? Everybody's a winner there because it's going to be stored with you. There's no printouts. There's no 4 or 5 different third parties involved, each taking a cut. You get it directly from the hotel or the airline. The airline's happy because they don't have empty seats. Because the great thing about NFTs is they're easily changeable. If you decide I'm getting on flight tomorrow to Da Nang, right? If tonight I suddenly realize I can't go, for me to get that money back, or for the airline to fill my ticket, it's near impossible. It's probably not going to happen, right? As an NFT, I could instantly, trade this to somebody that wants to buy the ticket, and details are transferred over. It's stored on the blockchain. The airline will have be able to track it, and they'll see it, and they'll have somebody on their airplane. The hospitality, right? Same thing with hotel bookings. If I want to cancel a hotel booking and it's under 24 hours, I'm never going to get my money back, right? But I could instantly transfer it. Again, from the hotel's point of view, it's a win-win for them, because if somebody is in the hotel room, they're spending money in the bar or the restaurant. That's much better than keeping the money of someone who cancelled within 24 hours. There's kind of loads of other. I say ticketing is an obvious one. Supply chain is a really great one. There's so many use cases in there for NFT usage. Music, content creation, token gated experiences. Some musicians are starting to play around with this. So when you buy a limited edition release of an album, you also get tickets to a live acoustic show or something like that. And maybe you will get if you're the higher tier of NFT, it's a slightly more expensive one, perhaps you'll get a really limited edition single release further down the line. So it creates a real close connection between brand, whether it's a musician, and their audience, and they get to really know each other and can influence each other. Fashion is another one. Lots of fashion companies playing around with the tech. Like Adidas, they did one with an NFT release. Owners of a particular NFT got to vote on the next color and design of the tracksuit that they were going to release. So not only did, when they bought the item of clothing, they got that item of clothing, which was limited edition, they got an NFT which allowed them to influence the future design of releases. Another revenue stream for Adidas, and just you've got then a much more loyal consumer, really. They feel a sense of ownership of the brand. Again, completely revolutionizing marketing and, you know, brand consumer relationships.
You know, touching on marketing, I'm currently building up my marketing agency. So
Cool.
like, and again, I'm want to work more with companies in the immersive experiences and the immersive marketing strategies. And I'm thinking from the way of, you know, showing myself and my company, you know, and selling it. And I'm playing with an idea of like using those immersive technologies in my own marketing of my company, right? In my own branding. Like, what could I use as an NFT, for example? Again, it's like B2B. No, it's a B2B segment because obviously I'm selling services as a business to a business and helping them promote. What could be my version of NFT? I know we haven't like I haven't told you about it. I just had this idea right now to ask you. So a bit of like, you know, improvised question, but I was just curious.
I mean, yeah, it's so dependent on kind of what your services are and whatnot. But, you know, I think that the most important thing would be, you know, building out a community. And that's essential for any Web3 project, is building out a community, because ultimately, Web2, the key difference is you've got an audience, right? In Web3, you've got a community. A community means you're engaged, right? So what that, you know, before any, you know, NFT release and drop and like that, you've got to build a community and find out what they want, find out what's important to them, and you can do, you know, you can do that. You know, quite simply. I mean, it takes a long period of time, or, you know, a lot of NFT projects spend 6 months or something doing that before. Find out what the community want, and that will basically ultimately influence what you can potentially do for them, and get them involved with that. Whether you kind of give them a free NFT that allows them access to certain amounts of your services, and then you kind of have future drops that they pay for beyond that. Whether it's courses, you can give them a you know, a proof of attendance, which like a record that they've attended it as an NFT.
So I've just had an idea, and I want to run it by you. What if I create like an NFT collection, and like, again, this is gonna go public, so maybe somebody is gonna steal my idea, but like whatever. The NFT collection my clients get allows them to have cross promotion between all the people, the holders of the NFT, who are my clients, and this is the community of the clients of my agency, who can like cross promote their projects and services on their own like platform. I guess it like buys space, like, you know, add space basically in like our clients, people. So something like that to like, you know, build up the community. So, and community, they should interact with each other. So again, as you said, it's not an audience, so they get to
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And engage them in something that will keep them there, something that will give them a sense of ownership, right? Because that's all the premise of what Web3 is. It's giving you that connection with your community that allows them to feel, you know, part owner of the business, you know. And again, you have to think, what aspects of, you know, my business, my service, can I involve them to help you, but also then to give them a sense of ownership? Again, a bit like the Adidas thing, right? With just human psychology, we feel attached to something if we get an influence over how something is done, whether it's voting rights on something, you know, influence on a future drop, on a future release of whatever your product or service is. And, you know, you would give that to anybody that has an NFT, you know, whether you give it to free for people that have, you know, been with you for a certain period of time, or whether you charge for it and it gives them additional benefits. That's, you know, that's up to you. And in the same way as, remember, you know, the fundamentals of what you're looking to do should be about business, and then you kind of fit the tech to it, what will the tech enable me to do afterwards. But with stuff like this, it's just, yeah, play around with it, build a community, start to look at the possibilities, start to look at what, people are doing in a similar space. Start to look at pain points with traditional Web2 companies in kind of your area and think like, what could we do? How could we involve my community more? How could they feel more engaged with me and
But
your
that's the
business?
thing, like, I don't want, again, this might be just me talking because, like, a selfish person and an egoist about my own business, that I want it to be all my own. But I'm not sure, because it's not like a product business, it's a service business. And I can't really give much of ownership and choice as to what sort of services I provide, because I only have, well, like, it doesn't matter how much education I get or experience, I only ever have like a limited set of skills and tools at any given moment in time. I can just radically change my production, like of what sort of services I provide. So I'm just like thinking, like, again, it's more of like I think community thing. It should be something to do with user involvement, not like user engagement, but like client engagement within themselves. Because like I can't uh, give them ownership, or like it's like would be like giving them shares or something of the company, which I guess it's kind of similar, but it's not something.
Yeah. I
But
mean, it
it's
doesn't,
like
yeah.
not the legal one. If I'm giving them shares of the company, it's like a bit different, sort of.
Mm. But yeah, I mean, that sort of ownership, it doesn't have to be obviously, but ownership by feeling they're influencing a decision, it's the same thing as, you work for a company. If you work for a big business, that is set up and, it's run by, power hungry C-suite and they don't involve their staff in any decision making, anything like that, you're going to create a bit of a mediocre at best culture, right? Staff don't feel engaged. When they are involved in decision making within that business, new commission structures, or, are we going to trial a 4-day week? Are we going to trial remote work and putting it out to a vote? You have an engaged staff base. Like, that's a no brainer. People know that now. That's how you create good culture. That's that sense of ownership. People feel like they make a difference. So it doesn't literally have to mean, it doesn't mean you're giving those staff don't have shares in the company. They don't literally have ownership,
Yeah,
but it's a sense of being involved in decision making, which ultimately is beneficial from the company's point of view because they've got engaged staff that want to stick with them, and that's the same as business. You want your customers to stick around, and again, it's that psychology, that human psychology. If I feel part of something rather than just consumer, you have engagement. And again, that's what Web3 kind of tech allows. Read, write, own web, or whatever it's called.
um, like, again, in preparation for this podcast, I sent you an email where the last point I described to talk about was, I mean, probably a bit rude to certain CEOs and executives, where I said, how would an unimaginative person uh, come up with his own ideas of where to implement NFTs? And we guess we kind of touched upon it, me being unimaginative right now, and you like talk me through how I should approach it. But when there's ever a tool, like a new tool, I've done it with AI recently because I looked at well, I looked more on the client side of things, my marketing workflow from like research, content creation, right? I've broken it down into like subtasks, like so like validation, service, well, when it comes to research and content creation, writing, producing image content, oh, all the stuff. So I saw the whole basically overview of the whole workflow, and then just looked at the AI tools which are available, and then price it later. And where could I slot in something to improve, to optimize my workflow? And that's how I try to approach new technologies and also client strategies. So if a client comes to me asking for something, well, first, like, let's look where we can actually put in something. Uh, not necessarily AI, like whatever, anything. It's like the same work. So like, which social media it's better for them to be promoted? Is it like LinkedIn or Instagram or TikTok or YouTube? Well, it's heavily depends on the actual needs of the company and the target audience. So like, let's look what best suits you. So that's how I try to approach it. That's how I try to structure it, like in my head on my like sessions for my business or like somebody else's business. And that's why like the question comes to you. Is it like similar way you'd suggest to approach for people who like want to include NFT in their business? Or should they approach it somehow different from like goal oriented, such as you replied, what do I want to get out of this NFT? Is it like user engagement, client engagement? How should people actually like look at their business, whatever it is, and like find places to put in the NFT? And also like maybe a question which comes together with it: how should people approach understanding what NFT is? So like if I'm a person who only thinks about like Bored Apes, is it like courses? Is it videos? Well, obviously speaking with tech people, but like where should you go look to really understand, okay, what is NFT and how this technology applies to like my supply chain process that you described, like more on the client side of things with like travel and memberships and all of this.
Yeah, so I mean, great. I mean, great mention of finding out about it. So I think there's two things. The business 101 is look at your current bit. I mean, if you've got a current business, there's two things. We can either be talking about someone that's got an established Web2 business and they're trying to improve things, or whether you're a founder and you're looking to start up a business and do something differently. They're kind of two different approaches. But like you described, how you do with your kind of AI tools, and you look at your workflow and you look at areas you can improve. Again, this is business 101. You look at your current business and think, what areas can be improved, by the technology that's available, whether it's AI, whether it's blockchain. But ultimately, you should be looking at areas of your business that could be improved. Is there a way, does blockchain technology or NFTs allow us to potentially look at a more creative way to engage our consumer, our community? Is there additional revenue streams possible if you're a fashion label or a football club or something? That's one way to look at it. You could look at that. If you're a ticket master, or a ticketing company, there are obvious big pain points in the ticketing industry. And then what you do is, okay, well, I'm going to go out and see how the technology really works. How can it be implemented? That's very different to someone that's wanting to start as a Web3 native. They might start with an idea already of what they want to create because they know a pain point. But you're right. I think it doesn't harm anyone, whichever one of those scenarios you're in, to go and learn about the technology. Just as a foundation. And I know we don't market with the tech. We shouldn't lead with the tech. We shouldn't, promote with the tech. But just to have an understanding, a foundation, even if you don't use it, you don't talk about it, understanding the foundation of NFTs, what they truly are, research use cases, even if they're not within your industry, it might help you understand. That's how it worked for me. There's things like supply chain, it was authenticating pharmaceuticals, it was, putting educational credentials as an NFT on the blockchain. Those were the things that made me understand it, because I really went, okay, I get it. Because I'm not really into flipping and trading with digital art. I played around with it just so I knew how to buy and sell, NFTs. But in the same way as I'm not into currency trading, it's got its place. It's not my thing. I've invested in a few projects, but I'm not a day trader or anything like that. Does that mean that I've got no reason to study and consider blockchain technology? No, because there are so many more use cases for it. So absolutely, and the great thing is, we're so early in the technology, and there are a lot of people trying to do what I'm doing, which is dumb it down, make it easy to understand, and talk about stuff that isn't being talked about. So what I've done early on a lot of the time is I've gone, right, let me pick an industry I hadn't thought of, education, and just Google blockchain technology in education or NFTs in education. And you will find, if you look at some reputable publications, sites, reports, you'll find some really good, nice information, because there's a lot of people recognizing that education is a big problem for people working in the space, and every man and his dog that's out there waiting to be mass adopted. So there are lots of useful sources of information that just talks about examples. Don't worry about the tech, don't worry about which blockchain it's built on. Just understand what's possible, what the technology enables. And then once you have that foundation, you can go back and you can look at your business, or you can go back to your blueprint of your startup and go, okay, now what's possible? Then you can get into the nitty gritty of, deciding what blockchain, finding a development company like ours to help with the development, the smart contract auditing, all that stuff. But you don't start with that. You start with the fundamentals of any business. What's a pain point? What can I do? Understand the technology and go from there.
So there's probably the last question I have about technology and how to use NFTs. And it comes from the famous quote by Ford about, if I asked my customers what they wanted, they would have said faster horses. And instead he made automobiles, right? So, and there's also another example which I've spoken to some people, and they gave an example where, well, they wanted to give NFTs to their clients. It was online service, but their clients said we don't want NFTs, we don't care about it, we don't want to deal with it. And the question is this: should you force this innovation onto your clients, or do you reckon you should just listen to them and be okay, if they don't want it, I'm not gonna implement it in any sort of way? But again, that's why I go back to the quote by Ford, and also a lot what Steve Jobs was doing with his technology. Well, he created the product which people didn't know they wanted, and then the actually customers and the audience just lined up for days outside the Apple store for the new device. So this is I'm also always thinking about as a marketer, because, well, yeah, sure, you can do many surveys, you can get a lot of feedback before the actual product is made, but then people have their own misconceptions, which maybe your product is changing it, and wants to well, I'm not gonna say every product is a disruptor, but you get what I'm saying. The fact that they didn't know what you are making, so they can't have an opinion about what you're making.
Yeah. So again, you have to involve your community, your customers, your audience in everything you do. Whether you're a musician trying to get feedback on what type of music or concert or access do your fans want, or whether you're a business trying to figure out what kind of utility your DEX or centralized exchange platform consumers want to use. You need feedback, right? But the reality is, you hit the nail on the head. We don't lead with the tech, right? Mass adoption. When we really achieve mass adoption, it will be when every man and his dog is using Web3 technology, but they've got no idea that they're doing that. They won't have a clue, and that's where we're going to get to. And by that I mean passports, driver's license, degree certificates as NFTs on the blockchain. No one will have a clue, and this will help, work permit processes when people move country, and paperwork, reduce time, reduce cost. But the person that has their phone with their passport stored on the blockchain as an NFT, will they know it's an NFT? Probably not. Will they know it's on the blockchain? Probably not. And why should they? And that's the reality. So if I asked my dad now, do you want to have, your passport as NFT? And he'll be like, what, NFTs? No, isn't that some scam or something? He will tell me no. But the reality is the value add, once that system globally is in place, is going to benefit everybody. But they don't need to know what the technology is. And then again, that's what the important thing is, value add, leading with the value, And then the only other thing that's kind of a big thing that's inhibiting mass adoption is user experience, and that is just common. We're early in the technology. We're not yet at a point where things are interoperable, and UI UX is improving. It's a million miles away from where it was only 6 months ago, but we've still got a long way to go. For everybody to be comfortable using digital wallets and stuff like that, we need to do away with seed phrases, and we're getting that. We're getting to that point where onboarding into Web3 is easier, but we're not there yet. And that is what that is how we break out of the Web3 echo chamber into everyone else that we want end up using the technology.
Yeah, definitely on LinkedIn it seems like we're all like in an echo chamber.
Yeah, 100%. And you hit the nail on the head. Like when you're pitching any product or service in business, you've got to talk to your community, the users, right? Not your mate who's also in Web3. You'll go, yeah, that's a great idea. Because we don't know what makes sense and what doesn't to the person that actually wants to be using the NFT booking system on an airline, right? It's got to be the user. It's not got to be your co-founder who's also a Web3 DJ.
Yeah, well, that's definitely as well. But like, again, like if it's seamless, you just do it and it just becomes easier. And again, as you said, like people don't even like, oh, okay, so it's like it just works better one day, and they don't even know. And that's where the mess.
That's what technology should do. Technology is not. It's an enabler, right? It enables something that previously wasn't possible. What do we focus on? The thing that it allows us to do, not the enabler. We don't think of electricity when we turn the light on. We just think of going from dark to light when we enter the room, right? We're not thinking about the fundamentals of what happens behind the scenes. And why should we, right? That's not. Yes, it's important, but that's not what we care about. We care about what that electricity or power enables us to do. I care about answering my emails. I don't care about the power infrastructure that's powering up my laptop right now.
Well, it's we're in a different time where everybody has a platform of sorts. Like even people who are not like content creators of any sort, they're constantly on the news. They hear all this stuff from their favorite bloggers, not bloggers. Like everybody heard about, like not everybody in the world probably, but like everybody who is connected to the internet in some sort has already heard about NFT over the last 2 or 3 years, right? Not everybody may not know what it is, but everybody heard about it. And again, there's so many misconceptions that people just form their opinions about it. And then there are also different types of people, different sorts. Those who are like very anti-NFTs and they think it's a scam, and then there are those who are like pro NFTs, pro AI, pro Neuralink. And I'm not saying I'm against it, but I'm saying there are people who are spearheading the developments, be it for good or for bad, right? And in the past, like when people were building like emails and first websites, well, we definitely didn't have any sort of like to be connected with each other. Same goes with electricity. Same goes like maybe even to like with any technology. But now we're connected, and what we hear online and the opinions people get from it, I think there's a larger chance of like miscommunication being there right now. And that's also I think with AI, which is not the topic of what we're discussing today, but I feel there's so misinformation about what AI is and how it works.
Yeah, I think that's just the nature of the time that we live in, right? There's so much misinformation out there, and it's so easy to spread misinformation. You go back pre-internet, and you could only really spread misinformation to the people in your pub or something like that, or your colleagues at work. Where here, in this day and age, you can instantaneously reach thousands, potentially millions of people with whatever the hell you want to say. And as it's been very topical over the last few years, politically and whatnot, and how do we, with COVID, and how do we verify real information from not. But hey, and this is a whole another conversation. But again, this is where blockchain, can potentially, benefit things in terms of being able to kind of verify certain bits of information. They're already talking about, something like NFTs. Sort of, as you mentioned before, when you're looking at the art side of things, right? It's so easy to make a copy NFT of a board, a BAC Board 8 Yacht Club. And to the naked eye, someone that doesn't know how to, read Web3 blockchain technology, to the naked eye, it looks exactly the same thing. But ultimately, blockchain technology and even AI, could in the long run be used to kind of verify and potentially weed out misinformation. But that's a whole other minefield.
Yeah. I'm just, I'm thinking like, you do know what Mandela effect is, where like people, I'm just explaining it more to the audience, maybe somebody haven't heard, but where people thought that Nelson Mandela died in prison. Well, he didn't. And like people like, and there are many different theories how it works, social and like some are like conspiracy theories, like, which is insane. But I'm just thinking that like with deepfakes right now, there was the Pope wearing some stylish jacket, and then there was also the Trump arrest one, but no, not the real one which he had, but before that where it was kind of violent and he's being dragged off the street. But the thing is, like, I as a person who doesn't pay much attention to Trump or the Pope, I could have been just scrolling it, seen it with like a couple of like seconds, and like just oh okay, he was arrested, and just scroll on. And then I would go on following this day and the next day, believing that this is what actually happened. And I like, it doesn't matter if it's like blockchain authorized, not authorized, if there's like,
absolutely right.
yeah, because I'm not gonna go and like look into it. I don't care. I don't care enough to find out the truth. I'm like, oh, okay, that's just another news which happened, and like I move on. And now I live in the reality where I believe this is what happened. And
that is why, I would go as far as saying, probably 90% of the world's problems from the last 10 years are because of that, because of now the ability and the unchecked ability of people to spread misinformation. And that's why we saw it throughout COVID, the amount of people that were COVID deniers, and you see it politically, misinformation. This is way before AI has kicked off. Before deepfakes, just spreading misinformation politically, whatever it is, has been well publicized to cause a lot of problems. For 5-10 years more maybe. But there is talk that this is again where blockchain and AI could potentially work together to verify against misinformation, misquotes, deepfakes, all that stuff.
But there was like, I just want to share one, like there's another side of the coin where there was like a political scandal a couple of months ago, where there was a telephone discussion by two oligarchs basically, and it wasn't a very flattering discussion of like the current events. It was leaked, obviously. And the next day after it came public, they're like, oh, it isn't us. It's just neural nets and deepfakes. It's like, well, we don't know what this is all about. It's like, so like,
Yeah, I think, well, I think that's a problem that is, as old as humanity. Now it's just exponential with technology that's available, but people being able to cover up and spread misinformation and leak, that's as old as humankind, I think. But yeah, you're right. It's only again, this is the technology, AI, blockchain, it's all new. This stuff has to be around for a while before it can start to really be implemented for kind of better uses and whatnot.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for coming today to talk to me on the podcast and like spreading correct information, hopefully, about NFTs.
Yeah, I hope I've got that all right.
Yeah, no, I think that those discussions are important. That's part of why I'm doing this podcast about, like, again, different topics and with different people, to really share this information. This is my way of like showing input into it. Because again, I do it more for the businesses who are Web 2 and go into like Web 3 space, so they know what they're doing.
Yeah.
But for everybody, it's important to be educated about it, and especially if you want to be successful in this changing business environment. I feel you need to be at top of at least knowing what those tags are, and then you can decide whether you want to use them or not.
Absolutely, yeah, 100% is, and again, we're super early with this technology. So now is a great time for people to really go out and understand it, whether it's for their own business purposes or just from a point of view of being a user and wanting to make the most of the technology that's potentially going to be available. Go out there and have a play, research it, and you'll end up probably like what happened to me is really intrigued and enthused by what the possibilities are with this technology.
Sure. Sean, why don't you tell people where can people find you and read up on your like NFT information and other content which you produce for online?
Cool. So, I mean, I do have a Twitter and a Facebook, but predominantly LinkedIn. So yeah, Sean Delaney, and the
Okay.
company is SENS. But yeah, that's where I put out most of my content for now. So yeah, give me a connection or a follow, and I'll keep you in the loop.
Definitely. Well, once again, thank you very much.
Cool. Thank you very much for inviting me. It's been a pleasure.
So